Okay, in this video I'll be going over task, and this was one of the tickers that I missed and I didn't really do well on in terms of catching it. So the idea in this video for me personally is going to be going over the characteristics just so that they help me catch the next ticker that sort of acts like this, and also I'll voice out the reasons or try to identify the issues that I faced in, why didn't I position in this particular name right around this spot. So one of the first things with anything that we do in the markets is we want to have a process, right? How do we get this particular name on our radar, and how do we sort of keep track of it so that when it does something like this, it should pop up on our scans after market close. It should be part of our weekend routine to be sort of on top of this name, and then we should really be on top of it after the next few days, which are really crucial to sort of entering the name so that we can catch a move from the 40s all the way to the 75s. So with this particular name, one of the first things that I notice is the fact that we had about 7 million on the IPO day. So when we have 7 million on the IPO day, that could be one of the requirements that you guys set for the key watch list that we have. So we have how many key watch lists? 3 key watch lists: the gappers list, the IPO list, and the HDF watch list. So this would go on the IPO watch list, and what you guys could do on your end is when you're maintaining the IPO watch list to scan for IPOs with a minimum where the volume is greater than 6 million. So this one had a fairly good closing range on its first day as volume came in. It opened above its offering price as well, so that's a positive. And then we sort of, this is at this point, whichever day is a Friday, when you're doing your weekend routine, it should make our weekend routine. And then when we're updating the key watch list, it should make our IPO watch list. From that point on, this name doesn't really break down the low of this day one of trading, right? So this is your day one of trading, and it never really it broke that low, but it closed above, and it was there was no real reason to completely take it off the IPO watch list. If it did something like this where it completely catered down, right, and went into distribution, then that's a different story, and at that point we could take off a name like that from the IPO watch list. So the other thing that I see in this name, so this is the process, and you scan for IPOs on on the weekends. This one meets the volume threshold. Let's say you come up with a volume threshold of 6 million. This makes it to your IPO watch list. And then the second is we look for edges, right, or clues, right, or what we call the recipe, so that we could position in a name like task. So at this initial run, what I feel or what I see that's impressive is when the market in this area, so the dotted line above is the market was going down, and the purple line says that this stock sort of narrowed its ranges, and it acted really, really well right in this area. So while the market was going down, it narrowed its ranges, and that shows you that that's subtle accumulation, because there's a lack of willingness to sell this particular stock. Now what we get out of it is when the market rallies, which is the dotted line, the stock rallies, right? Because the pressure comes off of the market. Whatever doesn't go down when the market's going down is exhibiting relative strength, right? That's a fairly basic concept and a really core concept that we use at TL. So this is exhibiting RS right in this area. And then we see it go up and out from about the 30 to 35 range. Now, what happens on this particular name after the fact is, as the market's rising, it sort of falls off, and we see that it stops participating because the RS line is going down and it's not really interested in moving up and out just yet, right? So if you were in this trade from 30 to 35, it breaks, it sort of struggles at 35. You could scale some at that point, could be 1/3, could be 1/2, and then as it comes back in, you close your position, but you would still make good money on this particular name. So let's just keep going with this. Just erase all the drawings. The other thing that I noticed on this particular name is the fact that it's sort of a corkscrew type of base. And what I'll tell you exactly what I mean with a visual on the screen. So a corkscrew base. So I thought I'd grab a visual of a corkscrew base. What basically, like a corkscrew, we get this initial run, which is basically, you could say, the pole, which is this particular pole here. And then the stock sort of trades, within this initial range that it developed. So this one isn't the most perfect one. Let me just erase that. So this one isn't the most perfect one because we uppercut that little IPO day area for a few days, right? And then we come back in. But majority of the time, right, we get this little, that's the handle over corkscrew, right? The handle over corkscrew. And then we're sort of trading within that area, sort of up and down, right? Where we're going up, we're going down, we're going up, we're going down, we're going up, right? So that's basically a visualization. So what happens in this area is we're building potential, right? We're building potential, which basically equals we're building energy for a move like this. Now we don't know that, it's gonna move like that, but when we see a pattern that's very similar to this, the analogy of a corkscrew, we're building that sort of potential within a range that the stock is building, and then boom, what we get is this particular day with big volume. And as many of you know, this is one of the characteristics that we track. If I just draw a line across, right, this is the highest volume since IPO day. This is a winning characteristic, right? Highest volume since IPO day. And I'm going really slow, and that's sort of on purpose so that the information can really sink in and you could sort of absorb this information. And these are type of setups that you can, make them a source of income in your markets if you really, go out, find such examples and really master these. And when you see such a setup come up again, you'll execute it, and it will become, second nature to you if you actually go and study these after the fact. So what we get is the highest volume since IPO day, right? That's a winning characteristic, what we call a winning characteristic. It's a source of income, right? It's a source of income. If you go and do a deep dive just on this particular characteristic and find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples, historical ones, you'll basically master this sort of setup in the markets. Now, what we get is a highest volume since IPO day. We get our high closing range, right? Our daily closing range, which is DCR, is high on this particular day. And then what we also get on this particular day, sorry, I drew that the wrong way. So what we also get on this particular day is a catalyst, right? So a earnings catalyst. So things are coming together at this point. And what I feel was my failure on this one is the fact that clearly there is some sort of institutional buying in this area, right? And when the market went down in this area, right, the stock was still sort of within, range building, and it wasn't really broken down to its extremes. So that was, one of the things that I should have noticed as it remained on the IPO watch list. The other thing is this whole corkscrew, right? This sort of corkscrew base is what I call it, is where it's building potential, right? And it's sort of, coiling up. Some people call it coiling up a little bit on the daily frame. And then we get this characteristic that is a large source of income for us in the markets. Now let's talk a little bit about the entry areas. So once we get this sort of move out of the stock, what we want to see is on the down days, right? We see a dry up in volume. So in this area, what that tells me is if we just draw this up and out, is that the market was coming in the day it picked up, it decided to break out. The market was coming in that day, and it really took out the HVC area on the name, right? So this is your HVC area. Again, HVC stands for high volume close, right? There's a study on the forum that's being done just based on this particular concept. So this high volume close, we get some sort of dry up after this highest volume since IPO, and then we get big volume again on this particular day through the HVC area. We break out, that's our day one. We follow through, that's our day two. And at this point, the trade is really, really, really done, because you got a stock to basically go from this 40 area to 45, and then you start managing your risk here on out. So it went from 40 to 50, took a breather, held. So at this point, we held the 45 mark, right? So this 46.23 low, we held the 45. We continue rallying, and we never break this 10-day line. So we see this rising 10-day all the way up, and then depending on, if you didn't take any stock and you just went from 40 to 75, you're up about 90%, right? That's usually a good spot, to be taken at least a partial, maybe on the break of 70, or on a failure to uppercut 75. That could be a spot to take a partial. 30 could be a spot to take a partial, and then when it really breaks down, if you didn't take any partials, then this would be the first day to take a partial. The stock continues to hold its 21 day, right? Once you're in a winner and you take a partial into strength, that puts you in a better position to see if a stock's going to hold its 21 day. And then the ultimate rule is basically 2 closes below the 21 day, right? And if it does that, you exit the full position. If it doesn't do that, you continue holding, and it's sort of its initial reaction to its 21 day, right, has been fairly positive and has reacted quite well from that spot. So this is the other thing that I do notice is when the market went down in this area, we saw a bid come in, right? That's what's creating relative strength. Is the market's going down, someone in the market is coming up to step up to the plate and buy stock on that day, and that's how you get leadership stocks in the markets. The other thing, we got a bid right here, right? And a concept I'm working on is the fact that when we see this, right? And we saw that this is a RS zone. So what I'm working on right now is if I extrapolate this area, because this was, basically an area of price and relative strength support. The stock seems to be holding it, just about one close below that mark. So that's a little bit about, how do we get a name to fit our process? How do we get a name? It's clearly a name and a characteristic. A winner always exhibits what we call winning characteristics, and it did exhibit this winning characteristic. We got high DCR, HVC, RS in this area, RS in this area, right? And then the whole corkscrew, base where it built up a lot of energy so that it could do this. So I hope some of that sort of, shows you the power of having a process, the power of how a stock should travel from a key watch list, say, the IPO watch list, to your focus list, and then how do we execute with respect to entry areas, HVC spots, and things of that nature to sort of come up, and into a trade that could potentially net us a fairly good return if we're really on top of it. So I hope this video sort of, ties together some of those concepts. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I would be happy to answer them. Have a good evening.